Hello, my treasures. The next Hearthstone set has been revealed. Showdown in the Badlands. If you've been paying attention to Hearthstone news, you'll know this actually leaked out about 2 days ago with a shirt due to BlizzCon. Though this does confirm the return of Elise, which is something that I predicted about a month or two ago when I realized what the key art was for BlizzCon. So let's begin with what this set is going to be about. Covering something that's never been covered in Warcraft before, a Wild Wild West theme. This will also be centered around Azerite, which is the blood of the planet Azeroth, since she is a Titan, continuing on with the Titan theme throughout this year. This set is actually releasing a little bit earlier than normal when it comes to the final set per year, November 14th instead of first few weeks of December, which is actually kind of interesting. It is a kind of bit of a shock that they're announcing it now and not at BlizzCon, but there should be some additional information there. Before we get into the cards themselves, the first thing returning for the set is Highlander cards, a fan favorite. We no longer have Reno Jackson, which is a little bit sad in rotation, but who knows, maybe they'll bring him back just because of this. We also are going to be getting the new keyword Quickdraw that does something on the first turn you draw a certain card. We also are going to get the other keyword Excavate, which are going to be centered around treasures that are going to start at common, then go up to rare, then up to epic. Once you get a epic treasure, it's going to reset back down to common and rinse and repeat as long as you keep excavating. We're going to start with the treasures first, just because it will make our lives a lot easier once we go over the excavating cards. The first card is going to be Escaping Trog, a 1 cost, 2 attack, 2 HP rush minion. Really good for aggro if you can randomly generate this on like turn 2. You should be able to slam it down instantly. Rock, a 1 cost that does 3 damage. Water Source, restore 3 HP, draw a card for 1 mana. Pouch of Coins, which could actually be very, very annoying if Rogue has a consistent way to actually draw into this. And Fool's Azerite, which is a 1 cost, discover a 2 cost card. It costs 0. Overall, these aren't supposed to be that game warping. And honestly, for the first pool, it's actually pretty well balanced. I would say Pouch of Coins is probably the one that you will want the most, or Rock, depending on what deck you're actually playing. Though there are use cases for, I think, every single one of these cards, even if you just want additional draw power, additional bodies on board, or additional ways to get a 2 cost card that might be a key card within your deck. Now for the rare pool, which are all going to be 2 costs. The first one is going to be Living Stone, which is a 2 attack, 4 HP elemental with taunt, death rattle, summon in a random 2 cost minion. Canary, battle cry, return an enemy minion to its owner's hand that has 2 attack, 1 HP, and is a beast. I'm curious of how this is going to interact. If you, for some reason, give your opponent a minion, will it bounce it back to your hand or their hand? Just because of how it's actually worded. Then we have Glowing Glyph, a 2 cost, give a minion and its neighbors +1/+2 attack. Then we have Falling Slagtite, which is a deal 3 damage to a minion and the enemy hero. And then finally we have Azerite Chunk, which discovers a 3 cost card. It costs 0. So if these treasures are anything to indicate of the overall theme of Azerite within the set, it is going to be a lot of mana cheat on a bunch of cards, which could be incredibly frustrating to play against. Overall, this 2 cost pool looks a little bit weaker than the 1 cost pool. Unlike the 1 cost pool, where all of the cards had some type of use in most decks, the 2 cost pool doesn't look like it has too many usable cards in a wide variety of decks. Overall, if you generate Canary, you're just going to really feel bad in most situations. Same thing with Living Stone. But hopefully the 3 cost pool is a little bit better than that. First one is going to be Ogre Fist Boulder, that sets a minion's stats to 6/7 to continue on the meme of Boulder Fist Ogre, something that people have been wanting a new version for quite a long time. For 3 mana, this is actually pretty decent, especially since there are some minions that could easily abuse this, such as Hollowed Hound, where you do get 2 uses and then it can act as a pseudo heal. The next one is going to be Motherlode Drake, which is a 4 cost, 3 attack dragon, rush, divine shield, a lifesteal. A pretty decent dragon for survivability tools. Then we have Steelhide Mole, a taunt reborn, cannot be targeted by spells or hero powers, 2 cost, 7 attack beast. This is going to be good for more control style of decks. Then we have Collapse, which does 3 damage to all enemies. And finally, we have Azerite Gem, which discovers a 5 cost card and makes it cost equals 0. The 3 cost pool actually doesn't look that bad. I still think the one cost pool is probably the best out of the three, just because of all of those cards being easily flexible for either removal or direct damage to your opponent's face, or setting up big wacky combos such as Pouch of Coins. Excavate cards, which then will get their bonus effects, and given some of the cards that we've been showcased so far for that mechanic, I think this will probably be a good enough reason to run cards that randomly generate these cards. Now let's begin with the first one, which is going to be Reap What You Sow, a 3-cost 1 Frost Rune card with deal 3 damage, excavate a treasure. We just went over the treasures. For a Death Knight list, this should be incredibly powerful. It is another way for Frost DK to do direct damage to your face, while also, in theory, generating additional cards that will let you go further. The one downside of this card is it is not a Frost spell, which means a lot of the Frost synergy that you do have in Frost DK is not online for this card, which may or may not make this playable in the current Frost DK list. Let's get on to the next card, which is going to be one of the best reasons to use Excavate cards. Harrowing Ox, a 7-cost, 7 attack, 7 HP undead beast. Taunt Outcry, if you've excavated twice, your next card this turn costs 7 less. This is what I mean. If we continue to get cards that print reduce the mana cost of another card by X amount of mana, the Excavate package is always going to be used. I'm curious of where this ends up falling in Death Knight as a class, just because Frost DK, or at least pure Frost DK, is probably not going to want to run a card like this. But you could easily use this in a Rainbow deck or a Blighted Boar deck to reduce the cost of Cagehead by 7, thus making him 1 mana, and then spreading this to Ox just so you can instantly trigger the Death Rattle whenever your opponent does attack into this. I think this is a pretty strong minion. I just don't know where it currently fits in Death Knight. Alright, let's get on to the Hunter cards. First one is going to be Messenger Buzzard, a 2-cost 1 attack, 2 HP beast. With the Death Rattle, draw a beast, give your minions in your hand +1/+1. Oh no, this is really, really frightening with the 1-cost spell that gives you the 3/4/1 worms, which would turn them into 5/2 worms on turn 3, and you could slam down all 3 of them on the exact same turn. That might be a little bit frightening. We also do have the cards within the previous mini set that when they die, summon a whose stats are equal to whatever attack that minion had. And because this is another very powerful Death Rattle for a Death Rattle Hunter deck, something that we have been kind of missing for quite a while now, I do think we might finally see a deck form around all those cards. Theldurin the Lost, I butchered that name, but it is what it is. Battlecry, if your deck has no duplicates, gain immune this turn and attack all enemies. If you have ways to buff this card up, aka the cards from the mini set that haven't seen play yet, and the previous card, you could, in theory, maybe even OTK your opponent using this card. But if you do find a way to get a double of him without turning himself offline, then this card is going to be incredibly powerful. You could, in theory, use him in combination with Fizzle. There's a lot of things you can do with this card. All right, let's get onto the next set of cards, which is going to be a Mage, Blast Mage Minor, a 6-cost 4 attack 4 HP minion that has the battle cry, excavate a treasure. For each card in your hand, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. I get what they're going for. This is a reference, I think, to the original Goblin from Goblins vs. Gnomes that did damage split among enemies if you had a mech on board. And I guess this is a cool retrain of that, but honestly speaking, I don't think this is a card that will see too much play. Since it doesn't do AoE damage to everything, I think this is just outclassed completely by the 4-cost mech that does AoE damage to your opponent's board. All right, let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Elise. She is going to be Elise Badlands Savior this time, a 8-cost 5 attack 5 HP minion with a battle cry. If your deck has no duplicates, summon 4/4 copies of 4 random minions in your deck. Now, I am curious of how this would work if you don't have 4 separate minions within your deck. Would you just get 4 copies of the exact same minion? Because if that's the case, then boy oh boy, is this going to be very annoying to deal with. Though, then again, Priest doesn't really have too many minions that they care about getting additional copies of cards of, and because you can't have duplicates within your deck, that would maybe make that idea a little bit weaker. This card will probably end up seeing play just because it is basically 5 bodies for 8 mana, which is actually pretty decent. I do think it might be a little bit too high cost. Reducing it by 1 mana would probably make it a lot more playable, but we also need to see if there are any neutral cards that supports the Highlander package, because if there are, then I think these cards will become a fan favorite like they were before. Now for Shaman, which the first one is going to be Dehydrate, a 3-cost spell that has lifesteal, deal 4 damage to a minion. Quickdraw costs 1. Now, this is good if you have an opponent's minion to instantly get rid of. It doesn't really matter what you hit, as long as you need to heal up for 4, then this card is decent there. However, I will say there are just better removal tools to maybe use in Shaman instead of a card like this. This doesn't have any type of spell school on it, which makes it a little bit worse. The only benefit this card has is the fact that it has lifesteal on it. Now let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Living Prairie, a 5-cost 5 attack 4 HP elemental. Battlecry if you played an elemental last turn. Summon 2 3/3 cows with Rush, and the cows are going to be beasts, because why wouldn't they be beasts? The artwork on these is really cute, though we don't really have too much elemental synergy currently in standard for Shaman, which makes me a little bit curious if that's going to be the overall theme for Shaman within the set, which is cool because it returns to the basics of Shaman. It's been a while since we've seen Elemental Shaman be a fully functional deck, and it's something that I can't wait to try out once again. This could also just fit perfectly in a Menagerie Shaman deck where you're using a bunch of the amalgams in order to act as elementals, and it's just a 5-cost minion that gives you, I think, what, 11, 10 worth of stats on board, which is not going to be the easiest thing to deal with. Overall, it's a pretty good card. I will say this, it looks like a really good card, and we will end up seeing a lot of play. Now let's get on to the next class, which is going to be Warlock, the Trolley Problem, a 3-cost spell that discards your lowest cost spell. Summon 2 3/3 tram cars with Rush, and these are probably going to have a mech tag, and yes they do. Hey, more discard Warlock support, aka the deck that keeps on giving in any game mode that isn't standard. This is a deck that they keep supporting within every single Hearthstone set, 1 or 2 cards, but it never gets to the point in standard Hearthstone where it is completely playable. However, I do think this card is really good. It's a card that gives you a lot of power over what you are going to be discarding, and does give you some additional bodies on board. The quick draw effect I don't think matters at all on this card, just because of the fact that most of the time if you're running this in a deck, you're probably going to want to run it in discard Warlock, and not having to discard cards and discard Warlock is kind of redundant. I'm really curious if we'll see any other discard Warlock support, or if this is going to just be the stereotypical 1 card per set. Alright, let's get onto the neutral cards. The first one is going to be Cobalt Miner, a 2-cost 1 attack 1 HP minion. Battlecry, Excavate a Treasure. We've seen them before. This will just be a pretty decent excavator for any excavating deck for 2 mana. Probably will see a lot of play because of it, and there are a lot of classes that will be some use of it. Alright, let's get onto the next card, which is the big bad of the set. Sheriff Barrelbrim, a 4-cost 4 attack 4 HP minion. That Battlecry, if you have 20 or less health, open the Badlands jail, which is a location that make a minion go dormant for 3 turns. Honestly, unless we see some other additional support for 20 or less HP, I don't see a world where this card sees too much play. It is a nice little control tool, I will say that, but most control style of decks also keep their HP pools quite large. In theory, you could maybe use it in an aggro deck where you're going to lock one of your opponent's big taunts so you can just ram their face, but generally speaking, I don't see how strong this card is going to be. Now let's get on to the final card revealed today, which is the free card, Thunderbringer, a 8-cost 6 attack 6 HP elemental, beast, taunt, death rattle, summon an elemental and beast from your deck. Currently, there are 2 cards that are great targets for this, aka King Crush and Ragnaros. The problem is, if you are running a hunter deck, this combo is incredibly difficult to pull off. However, if we see additional support for a card like this, it might become a lot better than it currently is. The main problem is the fact that it costs 8 mana to basically nothing, when things like Yogg-Saron exists in the neutral pool. Honestly, for a free card, this is probably one of the worst free cards that we've seen in a long time. And while I am going to be trying to make this card work, I don't see a world where this is going to be that playable until we see the rest of the set. All right, so that's all the information that we got for Showdown in Badlands. We also did get the announcement of Ngoro Crater being added to Twist next month, which should be interesting, especially because I don't have any of those cards. But overall, let me know what cards here you're most looking forward to trying out and what you're looking forward to maybe seeing in this set. I can't wait to see more Highlander card support because those are some of my favorite cards to try to make work. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, bye bye.